Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I am your host, Ray Harkins, and it's episode number 42. We're making history with this guest. More on them in a moment. PropertyofZach.com. Check it out. They've got all of the latest and greatest in anything that's happening within independent music, punk, hardcore, whatever you really like to call it, they're probably covering it. So check out their site, look at their features. You can get lost in there. You can spend a good hour and be like, wow, I am that much smarter because I read these new and current interviews and I know what's up with the bands and I've listened to some songs and all that stuff. Just become educated, aware of what's happening. Because, you know, we live in the information age, so there's stuff happening all the time. Stay on top of it with Property of Zach. And a few other house cleaning things, and then I'll get into the show, as it were. Review the show. Go to iTunes. Drop us some stars. Drop us a review if you're feeling like you got 2 minutes to sort of type up your thoughts in regards to what this show is and what it's about. Visit the website, 100wordspodcast.com. Obviously, you can follow us on Twitter. You can like us on Facebook. You can find all that at the website, 100 Words Podcast. I also post other fun stuff in between the shows. That way you're able to keep up on, basically stuff I stumble across that I'm like, you know what? This is cool. The listeners of this show would probably like it. That's exactly what goes through my head. So, anyways, the guest this week, Mish Way from White Lung. A lot of people have written me and communicated with me that, hey, when are you going to have your first female on the show? Because, let's be honest, within this scene, it's definitely a boys' club. Obviously, it's changing over time, and it has been for the past, 15, 20 years. But it's still a boys' club. In any event, I was really excited to set this interview up because, I don't know, if I don't know a person and I don't feel like I've got any immediate, friend of a friend connection, I feel like it's like a total lost cause. I don't know why my head always goes to that place of like, oh yeah, there's no way. There's no reason that they're going to want to come on this show and talk to me for an hour or so. Just threw the publicist an email. And after a few more emails, I was talking to Mish on the phone. She's the vocalist for a band called White Lung, like I mentioned earlier. I'd only become familiar with White Lung last year. And for those of you that are keeping score, you probably might have listened to the Best of 2012 podcast that happened, a few weeks ago. And it was myself and one of my good friends, Joey. We love the record, and other people that I've shown the record to have had the same opinion. So White Lung is definitely getting popular within the sort of, the fucked up world, so to speak, which is, indie rock in a way. But, this band is definitely punk, hardcore-ish type stuff. I recommend you listen to it. Listen to it before you do the interview, because that way it'll kind of accompany everything. Mish was awesome. Like, she was just, very casual, cool. This is the very first time I've ever spoke to her, obviously, like I was mentioning earlier. She was very gracious in her time. I was a little intimidated because I always get that way when I don't know a person, and I'm just like, all right, hey, you're doing this, essentially they're doing a favor. Of course, an interview is fun to a certain extent, and that's obviously what I want to ultimately make it for people, but so I'm always nervous when I'm like, hey, person I don't know, hopefully you're comfortable enough to not give me soundbite after soundbite, because obviously if you want that, you can look anywhere else. But she did not do that. And without further ado, here's the show, and I'll talk to you after.
I like to be the first.
Right.
Also, you could be breaking another rule because I'm also a journalist and I also have my own podcast. So
Oh, I didn't know that
So
you had a podcast as well.
it's on Vice. It's called Delicious with Mish. It started off as a joke because I said to my editor, I'm like, I want to do a sex and music podcast.
Right.
And now it's the podcast about interviewing like people. But anyways, yeah, I have one too. I'll send it to you.
I would actually really enjoy that because I just love this medium just because obviously
Hmm.
it's it's fun for people to express themselves in a non-soundbite fashion. I mean, you're a freelance writer. You know the deal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fun. It's really good, and I like how much control there is to do
Yeah,
your
for
own.
sure. No,
Cool.
totally, totally. But yeah, so I appreciate it because there was obviously no reason for you to do this beyond just like, oh yeah, that sounds fun. So good
Of
job.
course.
Thank you.
Yep.
Usually like to start things off with just like my own personal experience with, how I was introduced to your your own musical talents,
Sure.
so to speak. The
Mm-hmm.
because it was one of those things where I mean I followed Deranged Records for a while and know what they put out, but um
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's hit or miss for me, but I don't pick up every single release. And so
No, of course not.
even though that's kind of, there are labels where you're like, oh yeah, if it comes out on this label, I'm pretty sure it'll be good.
Mm-hmm.
And Deranged is usually that label.
Yeah.
But so, anyways, just a friend of mine saw you guys up in Seattle, and it was one of those just random emails he sent, like, hey, Ray, I think you may enjoy this band. Just like total, like, no context for it, just kind of dropped it off. And so
Yeah.
it just happened to hit me at a time where I was like, oh, sure, I'll listen to this because I don't have anything to do for these, like 2 minutes
Mm-hmm.
that, and so I listened
Mm-hmm.
to it, and um, it was so like immediately visceral where I was like, oh, are you fucking kidding me? Why have I not heard of this up until this point? And this was like, basically like I want to say about a month after Sorry came out.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so I don't know, it was just something that was so honestly like it reminded me of the first time that I heard Pretty Girls Make Graves, where like the first EP that came out, where it was just so it was obviously aggressive, yet it was poppy, yet it had sensibilities beyond just like, okay, we're just a punk and hardcore band. There was just like so much mixed up in it. So, anyways, what I'm trying to say is good job.
Thank you.
But do you find people having that reaction where it's like they first find out about, White Lung just randomly and then they're like, oh wow, like immediately they're either turned on or turned off by it?
Um, we've had I find there's been a lot of positive response. I feel like if someone didn't like it, they wouldn't bother saying anything, or
That's
maybe
true.
they would, but like I wouldn't hear it personally.
Right.
But yeah, this record has done really well for us, and it's funny that you use the Pretty Girls Make Graves reference because I hate that reference more
Sure.
than anything.
I'm glad I
Because
brought it
I
up.
don't, I not anything against their band. It's just that like I don't think that's the one reference. And there's also another reference we get that I don't think like, but that's the beauty of taste and like just listening to things because I can listen to American Snakeskin and think that it sounds like Gun Club, and then they're like, no, we don't sound like Gun Club.
Right.
But that's just the way it is. But anyways, I just had to point that out. I think it's
No,
funny.
no, that's fine. I mean, yeah, you always put yourself out in the limb when something reminds you of something, and then the person who's actually creating something is like, "The fuck are you talking about?" Like, that's not our frame of reference. Not saying that you,
That's just the way it is. Like
yeah,
it's totally fine. Like I used to get really upset or not upset, but think it was lazy journalism when people would compare us to Bikini Kill. And like, I love Bikini Kill.
right.
I actually just did an interview with Toby Vale, and she said some of the nicest things that anyone has ever said about me
Wow.
personally in print. And she's been a follower of us forever. I think their
Hmm.
band is incredible. But I was like, that's lazy journalism. Like, we don't sound like the music doesn't sound like 90s riot girl music. Like, well, maybe I have those tendencies within me, but so it's so particular.
Right.
And I think that's always a battle between like the artist and the journalist.
Uh,
And I kind of internalize that battle too, because when I write about other bands, I'm like, oh, I don't want to like.
right. Well, yeah,
I know. I'm like, I know what it's like to.
totally. Well, I think, I mean, you're coming from the perspective of, you are extremely self-aware when it comes to obviously what you do as a profession, and then obviously the art that you make outside of the
Yeah.
writing that you do. So you're just like, wait a minute, should I do this? Should I say this?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. It's a funny thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, the record's, I don't know, it's been really good, and people have been really enjoying it, and it's done really well, so I'm happy. We're starting to, like, work on new songs now, so I'm just trying to top Sorry and make another really good record.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I think that's what you're supposed to do, right?
Yes. If you're not doing that, then you're just going backwards, and what's the fun in that?
No, not fun at all. Um, so were you like born and raised, like I mean, from Vancouver, were you born and
Uh,
raised there, or where'd you
I
grow
was
up?
born in North Van, and I grew up there, and so did our drummer, Anne Marie. She also was born in North Van, but we were like, we were both grew up in different areas, so I didn't actually meet her till I was like 20,
Hmm.
21. And then I, like, right after high school, well, I had this friend who I became friends with in grade 12, and she played in a band, and I thought she was just so cool, and she kind of introduced me. She was the one that, like, did the thing where they, she shows you a good record, and the light goes off in your head, and you're like, oh, this is the music I've been looking for forever. Thank God it exists.
Right.
And then after high school, I went to Victoria, which is like the island of Vancouver, to go
Of
to school,
course.
and I hated it. Oh
Right.
my God,
Well, I mean,
so
for
boring.
for my own personal impressions, like I toured for a while and played a few shows in Vancouver.
Yeah,
I was actually shocked at how, and granted, of course, these are the areas that, most punk slash all ages clubs are usually in the shitty areas. But
yeah, of course.
so like I was just shocked because obviously you hear a lot about Vancouver being so beautiful, and then yeah, like you mentioned Victoria Island, like oh my God, that's like where you
Hmm.
go, it's beautiful. And then when I went to Vancouver, I was like, hey man, it's kind of a hellhole. Like there's a lot of shitty places around here. Do you find that juxtaposition funny? Like you notice it, I'm sure.
Um, yeah, and like there's some really seedy elements of Vancouver, but we have like a really high homeless and street population here because it's the most mild city in Canada. Weather-wise, like it makes sense to be here. But I feel like the parts of Vancouver like that right now are kind of being washed away. Like there's a lot of condo development coming in, and there's a lot, which is posing a huge problem for us. Like just this week, it was announced that all ages shows won't be able to be done at liquor licensed venues anymore, which means where the hell are they going to happen? And then also just today, one of the like city's biggest hotels that hosts like everything from bands, out of town bands, DJs, like screenings. Um, it's this huge multiplex club called the Waldorf just actually announced that it had been bought and is going to be changed into a condo, which is kind of the problem in Vancouver. Like we just lost our jam space,
Hmm.
like it sucks. Like it's funny because Rolling Stone just actually interviewed me about this too. Like they were doing this piece on the Vancouver music scene and how like the real estate is affecting the creativity in the city because there are no spaces for us to do anything really anymore.
Hmm.
I don't really know how I feel about it yet.
Yeah, you're still in the
Um,
middle of it.
yeah, but it's like Vancouver's funny that way. Like I feel like everyone's trying to like wash away all the seedy darkness of Vancouver and make it really the pretty thing that everyone thinks it is. And it is. Like there's city, forest, beach, mountains, it's beautiful.
Right.
But I
Yeah,
think it's important to keep those elements. I don't know.
well, yeah, I mean, it's always tough when you have a city that, is large and somewhat expansive to be like, all right, these are the areas in which we'll keep all of the degenerates, and here's all the areas where all the tourists need to go. And it's like once people figure out a way to expand those nice places that make money, then that's obviously when you get the problems that you're running into currently.
Yeah, it's like I don't know, it's ridiculous, but whatever.
Um, and so the city that you were born in, what was the name of it again?
Here, Vancouver, but I was born in North Van,
Oh, okay.
North Vancouver, which
It,
just means closer to a mountain. That's all that means.
okay.
Like I grew up closer to a mountain.
Got it.
That's
Got
all
it.
it means. And now I live in the city. And then, so anyways, and then I like lived here. I've always kind of lived here. I lived in Holland for a bit. I went and studied there for like a year and lived there.
Hmm.
And honestly, like if I didn't tour and travel as much as I did, I probably couldn't have this as a home base because I'd still be bored. But the people in Vancouver are really great. And so, yeah, I've always lived here and it's a good home base. for sure.
Sure. You feel the attachment to it, and it's obviously where you've planted your quote unquote roots.
Mhm.
Um, so like coming, like you mentioned a little bit ago, where you were saying when your friend that was a senior in high school kind of, blew open the
Yeah.
doors for independent music. How, so were you senior year as well, or were you
Yeah, I was
younger?
like, we were both in grade 12. We
Hmm.
started being friends in grade 11. And yeah, she had a band and she would take me to shows and she kind of taught me. I remember like I going over to work on some project at her house and we would just end up listening to music for like the whole time. And I'll always be indebted to her for like kind of, showing me good stuff because I didn't know, like I had this stuff that my dad listened to, like old Them records and stuff, but like
Hmm.
I didn't, have any access to anything other than what was on the radio. And then she really opened those doors. And once you get into that, you get so excited and then you just want to discover more and more and more. And it's like this obsessive thing. And you just, and then I started playing guitar and I started, cause I was like an athlete my whole life growing up. I was like a competitive figure skater. So my entire life was like sports. And then,
Did you
I
do was that at behest of your parents? Like obviously did they introduce you to it and you started doing it?
I don't like. It's not. My mom rode horses and did ballet. I don't even know why I started skating. I just really liked it when I was a kid, and then I
Yeah.
just got good at it, and that just kind of became what I like to do. And then I'd always been musical though. I'd always done like sang and done like plays and been a bit of a like an attention whore child,
Right.
needed to be in the spotlight in some capacity. So
Right. Were
yeah.
you an only child as well?
No, I'm the oldest of four.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
I could see
not
that.
an only child. A bit of the black sheep, but not an only child.
Right. So what did your as you were growing up, what did your parents do for a living?
My parents have this, like, it's funny actually, Wait Long, we always talk about this because all of our parents in the band are all still together, which is super
That
rare.
is that does not happen.
Isn't that weird? All of
Yeah.
our parents are still together and like super happy, which is, we're all like, that's fucked up. Like, that doesn't happen.
No,
But
I mean,
my parents,
yeah, especially from like the context of, I mean, because obviously a typical sort of like, like punk kid experience is like, oh
yeah.
yeah, my parents get divorced, like fuck my parents, and like,
No, we don't. We're like so opposite that we don't know where our anger comes from. But yeah, I don't know. My parents have like this really tragic love story, and it's like they're just so happy, and so they've given me like a pretty ridiculous idea of romance to live up to.
right, right.
But yeah, my dad has worked at the same company for like 30 years.
Uh,
And my mom was stay at home for a while, and she worked in and out of like different stores and stuff. So
sure. Well,
yeah,
if she's raising four kids, obviously that's a pretty full-time
and
job.
3 dogs, 4 kids and 3 dogs.
That's like two families.
I know,
I,
it's pretty
I,
good.
yeah, that's pretty impressive. So, do you think I think it's funny that obviously you recognize the fact that like, oh yeah, I needed attention. I needed to, people
Oh
to
yeah,
look at me in some way, shape, or form.
oh
Um,
yeah.
well, and
Oh, it's
obviously,
brutal.
and yeah, and I mean, figure skating I mean, that's not a team sport. You were obviously center
No.
stage.
Yeah, and it's like a weird sport because it teaches you to like internalize blame as well, and like it's a very like it's a feminized individual sport, and so it teaches you a lot about like discipline and blame and how, because you're marked on like the way that you appear on the ice as well as the things you can do on the ice. So there's
Right.
like a lot of interesting like gender things that come in with that. And I learned a lot skating. I'm glad I did it, but it's never gonna be an Olympic champion.
Right.
So
Well, and that's kind of the
in the guitar.
right. And that's kind of the course. Like you either, I mean, it's not like, whatever, baseball, softball, whatever, like where you can kind of like, oh, maybe I'll go to college and do this. It's like, you're figure skating, you're either going to do it like for fun for a few years or you're going to become an Olympian. Like there's no real
Oh, really
middle
serious, yeah.
course.
Yeah, totally. But anyway, so I did not become an Olympic champion.
Right.
That's why we're talking.
Yeah, I would have a lot more difficulty accessing an Olympic champion for a
Yeah,
podcast.
I think it'd be a little harder than some crummy punk, but
Yeah, exactly. Um,
yeah.
so you did your high school experience, like were you figure skating in high school as well?
Yeah, but then I, wanted to start having fun.
Right.
And you can't have fun when you're training every morning before school and training every day after school, and you want to go out with your friends and get drunk and make out with boys and
Sure.
try psychedelic drugs and be a little shit. So that
Right.
doesn't exactly align with the story of becoming an Olympic athlete.
Right.
So
You're not going to bed at 3 in the morning and then waking up at 5
no,
to go train.
I chose the fun route
Right.
instead.
So as you were, was your high school experience like, obviously you can develop people into archetypes and groups, like, where did you find yourself sort of fitting into the high school experience, and did you enjoy it at all?
I don't know. Like I think I don't know. I guess like it was fine. It wasn't like I really don't think about that part of my life that much because
Right.
it wasn't a huge thing,
Sure.
And like I was always loud, but I was nice to everybody, and
Hmm.
just kind of I don't know. Like I'm not really connected with anyone still from high school. I have one friend that I'm still really close with, and she lives in New York now, and she works for Warner Brothers Entertainment, and we're still really close.
Hmm.
And my first boyfriend, who I knew in high school, who I didn't start dating until after, now he lives in the UK, and he's doing his master's in painting there, and I still am close with him because we dated for like 6 bajillion years.
Right.
But that's about it.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I don't know. I like high school was fun. I was friends with like the cool girls, but I never really felt like I fit in that well with them, and
Hmm.
and then as I said, found the music thing, and I felt a lot more secure in myself. So
Right. That sort of flipped a switch within you where it was like, oh, this is what I
yeah,
was looking for.
yeah, exactly.
Um, and so what was your initial exposure? Like, what was your, because like you said, music was always kind of part of your life. Like, I mean, but you hadn't picked up guitar, like you were saying, until that sort of,
Yeah, I got introduced, like, you start off, and I got introduced to, like, as I mentioned before, Bikini Kill and the Misfits and the Pixies, and then
hmm.
from there you find Breeders, and then I found Hole, and my entire life flipped around, and I was like, oh my god.
Right.
And Babes in Toyland and all that 90s shit was
Right.
just, like,
Dude,
totally spoke to me.
Babes in Toyland. I haven't heard that reference in a while.
Oh,
Spectacular
I
reference.
love Kat Balin. I think she's incredible. That band's amazing. And like, so the strong women thing, like, always really to me was so impactful. Like L7 and that whole scene of '90s women that were just Jennifer Harema, like Christina Martinez from Boss Hog, like all those people that I just were like, oh my god, they're so cool.
Right.
So I got into like a deep spiral of that. But Courtney was always my favorite.
Right. And was it, I mean,
And
did it
but
specific?
yeah, and then you find people that like those same things, and then you find the White Person, and you find Red Cross, and then it's just like this blah. And I like didn't. I was like too young to have the internet access that there is now, so it was like a bit more of still like having to go and get CDs and records and start collecting that stuff.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah.
Was obviously the main attraction the fact you're just like, oh wow, like was it okay, was it the switch was flipped where it was like, okay, this is great music, and then oh wow, it does happen to be played by females, like was that something that you were
It was.
specifically looking for, or just kind of obviously was like
It
awesome
was.
that's there?
I think for me it was more just like because I'd always been very interested in music and been musical, and as I said, like sang and done like theater things here and there, whatever, like enjoyed that. But then there was always a rule within those kind of things, like within school or whatever, like you have to sing this part correctly. You have to, like sing this note has to be, you have to have this pre-verse, you have to sing, you have to do it right.
Hmm.
And then so when I first heard like a woman like screaming, it was so amazing because I was like, oh my God, I can do that. Like, that's okay. Because I never understood that you could break rules like that, and it would still be admired and accepted. And so I think for me, that was what was exciting, was that it was like, there weren't these rules that were
Yeah.
directing it anymore.
No, I like the idea behind that where because anybody, I mean, usually obviously when you're, a kid in high school, it's like the model is, to essentially try to be as perfect as you can, like get straight
Yeah.
A's and, kind of do these things. And then when you can, once you figure out you can, color out of the proverbial lines, I can see
Hmm.
why that obviously, it's like, oh wow, great. Like I don't have to be perfect and, they're missing notes and they're not actually singing, but they're still melodic.
Yeah, and it was like totally amazing. It was like the best kind of music, you know. It was exactly what I wanted to hear and exactly what myself at that time needed to hear to get inspired and to feel like, yeah, I can do this too.
Right.
So yeah, and then I like played in some bands with I had a band with my ex-boyfriend, which is how I met our bassist in White Lung, Grady.
Hmm.
Met her through a friend, and she jammed with us a bit. And like this band I had with my ex-boyfriend was like, Joy Division-esque, like weird. I played the fucking organ and the guitar. It was totally ridiculous.
Right.
And then I kind of wanted to start my own thing that was a bit more exciting for me. And then I met Anne Marie and I met Grady and I met our old guitar player Natasha, and they were people I knew that could play. And so we just started playing together. And then that was how White Lung kind of came around.
Sure. And the so as you were starting to get into things that, I mean, I'm sure, like you were saying that, you were a shit in high school and you started to, choose not figure skating and you started to decide to have fun.
I love how I mention figure skating in like whenever I do interviews, and then I wish I hadn't.
No, I know. So it was an easy in
It
and
was a
out.
good one.
But
Yeah.
so once you started to realize, your social life became more important. The like how are your parents reacting to that time where you obviously started to, you were doing things that, teenagers quote unquote shouldn't do, but then obviously once you started to get into the whole independent music scene, I'm sure that was like, how'd they handle that?
Oh, I was not the favorite.
Sure.
I was not the favorite ever. I was pretty, like, I always got good grades, which was kind of my saving grace.
Hmm.
I was pretty smart. I got good grades. That was fine. But I had, like, I was not the best child. I constantly in trouble. And you also have to understand my brother, who is the only boy in the family, and he's a year and a half younger than me. Like, my mother literally popped me out and then was pregnant with my brother the next day.
Right.
I don't know how she did it, but my brother was always really good. Like, my brother's in law school now. He's amazing. He's in law school, and he's done it all on scholarships, bursaries. Like, he has not paid a dime for his
Wow.
law degree, which is incredible. He's that kind of person, though. Very type A, follows the rules, very good. And so, like, he was kind of the proper older one, because I would have like a party and then he would come home and get mad at me and I'd be like high on mushrooms crying and like, it was just like, he was the good one. And so, yeah, I don't know. My parents, that's why I moved out when I was really young,
Hmm.
because I was like, all right, well, if I want to do my own thing, I got to do it on my own dime. And like, I can't, break my parents' rules time and time again. So I moved out right after high school. And yeah, but yeah, now we're good. Me and
Well,
my
yeah.
parents, they're happy now. But that was pretty crappy.
I'm sure that
Well, what teenage girl isn't a piece of shit? Like, we're the worst. Teenage girls. I remember a teacher telling me this. Grade 9 girls are the absolute worst, and it's true. They are. Like, when you're 14 and you're a girl, you're awful.
yeah.
You're so awful. Oh my God, I can't imagine.
No, I mean I have like a year and a half year old son and basically
Ooh.
I tell my wife constantly, I'm just like, you know what? Like I'm so fucking glad we don't have a girl because it's so like that, like you said, that age. I mean, boys obviously come with their, their quote
Their
unquote
own stuff.
issues. Yeah, their own set of problems, but yeah, it's like once, because obviously, I mean, especially as a father, you look at the idea of like, okay, well, my girl is going to be in a burlap sack until she's 20 years old. And then, only then, maybe I will allow her to lay her eyes on a boy. Like, it's just that whole mentality. And
Natural
it's like,
protection instinct, yeah.
of course. But yeah, no, yeah, grade 9 girls are shits. I think that's I think that maybe that should be like in the entry packet when you go to high school, where it's just like, you know what? You think you're cool, but you're really not.
You're crappy, you're awful, you don't know anything.
Right.
Me.
So did your parents understand the concept of you starting to want to, like play in bands and tour, and like was it always that sort of like, oh wow, really? You're doing this now?
Yeah, they were kind of like, okay, well, like my parents' big thing was like finish your degree. So
Hmm.
like, it took me forever to finish university because I was always working at least like 3 jobs while I was doing it, and so it took me a long time. And then when I think we started touring oh yeah, we did start touring during when I was in university because I missed my university graduation ceremony because I was on tour.
Okay.
We were playing with Pierce Arrows in Portland, and I didn't want to miss it. And my mom was so mad. And I remember she was like, "It's like your wedding." You. I was like, "It's not. It's not a big deal. It's paper."
Right. They'll send
Yeah,
it to
no, my
me.
parents have always been pretty good and supportive, but now, more so they're really excited because our band's doing good and I'm like supporting myself from it, and so they're like, they get it a bit more. You know how parents are, like, you could have, an amazing, like, review in, Spin or Pitchfork or Rolling Stone, whatever, but like, say your name's in the local paper, they understand that so much more.
Right.
Like, so ridiculous. But
Their
yeah, no, my
world.
parents have always been really, really good. They were like, you're doing your thing, go do it. And yeah, call
Yeah.
us if you're dying,
Right. Right. Call us if you're dying or you need us to bail you out.
No, they wouldn't even do that. Like one time on a tour, I remember I've said this before in interviews, but like I was so broke and so screwed, and I called my dad to borrow $100, and he was like, "It's your life. You chose this. Good luck." And I
Tough
was like,
love.
"Oh my God," like just crying. But I'm glad he did that. Like my parents are really good that way. Like they're awesome parents. I'm very happy I have them.
Yeah, no, well, that's cool because obviously it's like you've been able to balance out your, I mean, obviously as you get older, you gain perspective and you're like, yo, oh, okay, I see why they did that. That may have sucked at the time, but I see why they did that. Uh,
Hmm. Yeah.
um, and so what was I mean, so the first band that you ever played in was obviously like after you got out of high school and you started to go to university and stuff like that. Well, does the band have a name? Or are you allowed to reveal that, or is that too embarrassing?
The one that I had with my ex-boyfriend.
Or just the first time that you like, whatever, the first time you played a show, like did you have a
I
band
had
prior?
this I had this band in university in my first year at Victoria,
Hmm.
that was really like ridiculous. And we kind of like changed names all the time. I don't even remember, like one name was like named after like a Pixie song, I think.
Okay.
That was really funny. And then I had the band with the ex-boyfriend was called La Sauterelle, which is like means the grasshopper, and it was named after a farm.
Okay.
And there's nothing of these bands. Like, they didn't accumulate to anything. White Lung is kind of the first real band I've ever been in. And,
Right.
you
Like
know,
actually has something out that you can be like, hey, this isn't
yeah, and
absolutely
actually
terrible.
made a kind of like,
An impression.
like people listen to it.
Right, right. Someone
But,
might show up at our show.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I just always find it people's experiences with their first bands usually pretty humorous because obviously they're either playing a very juvenile style of music that they're like, oh yeah, we didn't know what we were doing, but obviously we wanted to play in a band, so we just threw this
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, we used to like, I remember in the band I had with my ex-boyfriend, we would like record stuff at his house, and I remember he'd just gotten Pro Tools, and we were like so excited, and sang everything in the shower because we thought it sounded cool and like more poetic,
You're
and
like,
like
dude, this sound this
it was
this
really funny.
this
We
this is
were,
like natural reverb. It sounds just perfect.
I know, God, but anyways, that stuff's important. It's fun.
Well, yeah, it's important. Obviously, it gives you, I mean, it gives you a context for obviously when you actually do something you're proud of. You're like, oh, I can compare it to something that I was not very proud of in the past.
Totally, totally.
Um, and speaking more towards, obviously Canada in general, I've always found it because I mean, I'm based here in California in America. Like, as you well know, like, there's no program to support the arts. And I've always found it so interesting because I mean, I've worked at labels prior to this, and like I've done a lot of different things and worked with bands in Canada where they've been able to, make music videos for free, like through, the factor grants
Yeah.
and all that type of stuff. For one, have you guys been able to utilize any of that? And two, is that something that like you're pretty proud of that your country does, or is it one of those things that's just like, oh, well, it's cool, but we don't really do it?
Yeah, it's good. Like, there's a lot of funding available. We're just kind of there's some rules within the funding, and so we're just kind of starting to. We have this guy that's been very helpful with us understanding how we can be eligible and get more funding.
Right.
But it's funny because a lot of the money does go to artists that don't exactly need it, like Metric or like big bands like that.
Right.
But at the same time, like, it's pretty good that it even exists.
Yeah. I always found it funny because I worked with this band based in Winnipeg, like pop punk band, like they were called Burn the 8 Track. And they used to be this band called Guy Smiley, who was whatever, like just total like Fat Records, Epitaph, pop punk type stuff. But he was just the lead vocalist of the band, was such an amazing grant writer that he got, he like over like $200,000 worth of videos produced for free. And I'm just like, what? Like that, there's no way that could exist anywhere. I mean, especially in America, obviously other countries are progressive and have artist programs, but I've always found it so interesting. And, when bands such as yourself are like, obviously like on the up and up, and once you guys are starting to be able to like actually apply for those grants and get them, it's like, oh, that's great.
It's super cool. Like, we were just really unaware of it, and like we're kind of maybe not, like, just being kind of naive about it, like,
right.
Oh yeah, well, maybe we can't get that, so what? Well, yeah, we could have, but I don't know why we didn't try. But yeah, grant writing's a very specific thing. You have to be very good at it.
Right.
And then there's people you can hire that are really good at it, and then you're guaranteed. But yeah, no, there's that accessibility is like wonderful, and we live in a very nice country.
Right.
Lots of nice things.
Yeah, and obviously it's like you always see with like, the Junos and like all the award ceremonies that are held up there, and like obviously the music programming that's up there, they have, a certain amount of airtime has to be dedicated to Canadian artists, and it's just like,
right.
You just see that and it's like, oh wow, I wish that America had something, just a little similar to that, maybe, but obviously that's not happening anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't know. It's your country, not mine.
It's true. It's true. That's why you live in Canada.
Yeah, no, I love America. I like your country.
Yeah, we got some good things.
You guys got some good stuff. I'm excited to go back to the States in March, especially now that we have our visas, so now we are allowed to come. I know. We had to cancel our tour in December because our visas got all screwed up and we couldn't come over the border, but now we are officially allowed. We would always sneak before, so that's a huge like weight off. That's the plus of having agents who are like, okay,
right, yeah.
Real.
I remember when I got my first work visa to tour up in Canada, it was definitely like, because I know it's just as stressful for Canadians coming into America, but
totally, yeah.
Like I've never, toured Japan, Europe, Australia, all those places, like they don't give a fuck. They're like, that's fine, go ahead. But then Canada, it's like
Europe.
Totally. Europe, same thing, where it's like, but
the UK is kind of like Canada and North America, though. Like, the UK people are strict. We had to like get all these official papers to play like 3 shows there.
Right. What was your favorite lie that you ever did in order to obviously come over to America?
Well, we just like this would be our thing.
Okay.
Because, Kenny, obviously one guy with 3 girls, right. We're all like at least 6 to 8 years older than him. Like, what is this 22-year-old doing hanging out with these 3 witches?
Right.
So Kenny would take a bus, or Kenny would get over some other way, and then we would just go, and we'd pull the girl card. We're just going shopping for a couple days. Like, we all look relatively innocent. Anne-Marie would drive, our drummer, because she's the best with the border. She's a very professional woman. Mm-hmm. And we would just totally pull the girl card, and it would work every time. It was like no problem. But one time, actually, I accidentally brought pot over in my pocket because I was waitressing the night before when I used to be a waitress. And there was this old guy at the bar that would always give me joints, and I would just shove them in my jean jacket pocket. And the next day we were going down to play some shows,
Right.
and I didn't realize I had like a bunch of weed in my pocket until we got to Olympia, and I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of serious.
Yeah,
Even
they
though
don't
weed's
like
not a
that.
big deal, but here it's kind of a big deal. Thank God we were like a bunch of girls in a rental car that looked like a police car, you know, like they didn't really question us, but
Right. Yeah. That's
we've
pretty
never really
interesting.
had to make up any crazy lies. Like I've heard stories of, you know, people in having to walk through the forest because they couldn't get over and like all this crazy shit. Like we've always been pretty lucky.
Yeah, I
Dress
definitely.
nice, tell them you're going shopping.
Perfect. You're
Oh, you're
in.
going to spend money in our country, not make it? Great. Come right on in, you know?
Yeah, my favorite was definitely always the fake recording contract where it's just like, oh yeah, like
Yeah.
we
Oh,
or you have to you know, you're if you're playing, you know, you cross through the Buffalo Niagara border and you're like, oh yeah, we're
right.
just driving over to Detroit. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, a week
Or
later.
another good one that Anne Marie's old band riff Randalls used to do would they would drive at night and they would dip in the States and say, well, we can't drive in Canada at night because there's a lot of wild animals and it's really dangerous. It is on certain roads, like
Uh-huh.
especially in the East Coast
Sure.
and kind of in the middle of Canada, like there's a lot of moose and things like that. So this was like probably 10 years ago, but you could just dip in and drive through the States because it wouldn't be as bad.
Right.
And the border guards would totally accept that. They'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, no one wants to get their
Yeah.
car hit by
We
a
want
moose.
you to be safe. Here you go. Wow, that's
Yeah,
impressive. Never heard that one. That's
so,
good.
yeah, so we never really had to make up any really
Elaborate
crazy.
lies.
No, I think it's better not to, because then you're just gonna wedge yourself deeper into the trial. You have no rights at the border. You don't have any rights. You
Yeah.
know, you don't follow the rules. It's bad news.
No, it's totally true. It's totally true. Um, and in one of my other first impressions about you know, the music that you're creating currently was the fact that, I mean, obviously, like, you know, three females in the band, like you were saying, it's like, you know, there could easily be the novelty factor. I mean, anytime a female plays in a band, it's always the novelty factor where it's just like, oh, I'll listen, you know, wow, this
Yeah,
band has a girl screamer or this band has a girl
yeah,
guitarist, like, you know, but obviously from the way that the band was presented, it was never about like, hey, we're girls, like, check us out.
yeah,
We're all right. Um,
yeah,
and I've always, I mean, obviously, I mean, coming from my own perspective, it's like I've never, you know, I, like you, were introduced to a lot of those bands in the early 90s, and I never had that connotation where it was like, oh, it's a girl and she's inferior and she can't really play music. Like, I never had that in my purview. But obviously, a lot of people, I mean, that
mhm,
I know that's dying more so now that you know, pop music, there's a lot of girls that are performing and doing that. But um,
mhm.
obviously I just like the, I mean, I presume it was a very deliberate approach, or it wasn't like, hey, like, let's make this a selling point of what it is that we're doing.
Yeah, no, like it doesn't really. I don't know. Even the name White Lung, I liked it because it wasn't gendered and there was no like.
Yeah. Just like
Yeah,
your favorite band, Pretty Girls Make Graves, right? Like, it's
yeah,
just
like my favorite band, Pretty Girls Make Girls, exactly.
right.
But yeah, I don't know. Like I've kind of gotten a bit labeled in the past little while as like because I am like a feminist writer and I
Right.
talk about those kind of things very openly and there's you know it bleeds into my lyrics which I think are pretty abstract like you know so that kind of has been put on us in more of a media sense which I'm totally fine with because I know how to like manipulate and handle that
Right.
but yeah but it was you know I'm proud of the fact that I play with three really amazing musicians but it doesn't exactly matter to me, like if they're boys or girls or whatever. And
Right. It just
you
happened.
know,
It just
like
happened to be that
yeah,
this was the case, and this is the pool of people you were friends with that, like, oh, hey, wow, this can all come
mm.
together.
But and on the other hand, like I'm really proud that like I have two of the most talented women I know playing with me. I'm so lucky to have like Grady as a incredible bass player. And Anne Marie is one of the hardest hitting, fastest, tightest drummers I think like going today. And you know, I'm really proud that they're women too, and that they're totally amazing at their instruments. And I'm
Right.
really proud that Kenny is a man.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, it is important. I think it's important because when I was little, like, it made a difference for me to see women doing something, because, like, the music industry can be pretty sexist. Like, it's changing. Everything can be sexist if you fucking dwindle it down to that. But
Right.
also you could just be like, fuck it and move along.
Right, right. Well, and I think it's important too because obviously when you're young and impressionable and you're getting into things, like no matter what it is, if you're finding, what if you're finding a style of music that is interesting and then you have people that are either your gender, your same philosophical views, like, you'll
Yeah,
gravitate towards that because you're like, "Oh, wow, that's cool. Like they're kind of just like
that's
me."
what it is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's important to have those connections, and yeah, it's good. I know, like, it's important. It's good.
Right. Do you find like because I'm trying to get a sense of obviously like who's coming to your guys' shows because I have yet to, have you played California yet?
Oh yeah,
That's what I thought, but I just haven't.
lots of times.
I've been out of the know and I haven't come seen you guys play. But
You just found our record. Don't worry.
no, I
We'll be
know.
there in March. We're playing. Where do you live exactly?
I live just outside LA, like the Orange County area.
Yeah, well, we're playing the Echo. This is not announced yet,
Okay. Well,
but
I won't be posting this for another, yeah, like 4 weeks or so. So we'll by the
perfect.
yeah.
So we're playing. It will probably be announced by then. I don't care. I'm just gonna say it. I can get in trouble. I don't care. We're gonna play at the Echo on like the 7th of March or something. So you'll have to come.
Oh,
And
nice.
we're
Of
playing
course I
with,
will. Are you guys
yeah,
coming out with anybody?
we're coming along. It's like on our way to South by
Okay.
Southwest, and we have to do some other festivals on the way to. We're actually going to be playing with our dear friends New Sensei because we're both kind of making our way down to South by, and I think like there's some few LA bands that we'll be playing too. But
Nice. Very cool. Well, yeah, the Echo's a perfect venue.
yes, it's a good place. So,
The
but
yeah,
yeah, we
so
have been in California. Sorry, I distracted you from your question.
no, no, that's completely fine. This is information for me. I'm selfish and I like to find out things. The yeah, so like, who's coming to your shows? Like, do you see it being, an interesting mixture of because an interesting mixture of people who are obviously into sort of, like you were saying, like, whatever the quote unquote riot girl experience, and then obviously people who are into like, punk and hardcore. Is it this kind of like
Mm,
hodgepodge of people, or do you find it sort of leaning more towards one thing where it's like, oh yeah, this is still kind of a, a
yeah,
punk show?
I think it depends more on the city.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, I think it depends a lot on where we are
Hmm.
in North America. And these next two upcoming tours are going to be, I think we'll see a lot of a difference because
Sure.
we haven't, like the last tour we did in the States was in the summer in like June, and we had to miss, and then we went to Europe and UK in the fall, and so we haven't been back to America since the summer. So
Yeah, it'll
you
be
know,
pretty telling for
but
you
yeah,
guys.
like I always see, it depends on the show. It depends on who's playing. Like we have like such a nice wide range of fans. I feel like,
Right.
and I don't really know. Like I don't really keep my eyes open that much.
Right, right. Yeah. You're not taking a census at the show. You're not taking a focus group, like an
No,
exit
I'm not
survey.
doing a focus group. Surprisingly not.
That sounds so
But
weird.
and also I'm really bad because I never sit at the merch table. Kenny always does that, or Grady. I never do it because I'm really bad at it. I'm really not good at keeping things organized. I just get frustrated. So
Right. So you're like, you can do your thing. I will not touch the merch.
I suck at it. I like
Um,
give everything away for free, and like
right.
I'm bad. I'm not.
Right. You're like taking care of one person every 10 minutes and there's like a line of like 30 behind that's like, yo, come
I like
on.
talking and giving shit away and just oh, I like your shirt. Like I'm just forget it. It's stupid.
What was your trajectory going to be like? I mean, as you're, going through university and like obviously if the band wasn't as important as it is right now, where it was the whole like sort of freelance writing thing just a byproduct of what it was you were doing musically, or was that something you're like, you know what, I really would like to do that?
It kind of happened. Well, as I said, I got my degree. My degrees in like gender studies and communications. When I
Hmm.
finished, I was working for a women's shelter organization here, volunteering with them. I was waitressing, doing all this shit, and I always really liked writing. And so I was writing this blog that's no longer around, but it
Mm-hmm.
was like doing pretty good. And then I started writing for this one New York publication called Hardy Magazine, and
Mm-hmm.
then someone at Vice Records liked our record, and then somehow my blog got passed to one of the editors there, and then I started writing for Vice, and then it just kind of like snowballed. And then I was writing more and more, and then in my head at that same time, the band was kind of touring a lot and doing more. And I was like, all right, you know what? If I'm going to do this music thing, I need to find a career where I can actually do both simultaneously and they
Mm-hmm.
connect and they make sense, because I will be fucking damned if I finish up with music, because we all know music has an expiration date depending on what you're doing.
Of
You know, you
course.
got to think like that. So I was like, okay, I got to find something that can work with it that I still love to do, and I love to write. And so I just worked really hard at being able to do both those things. And now, like, that's my job, is I play music and I write, and I'm, you know, really, really happy doing that. It's great because I can do it on the road, and I get a lot of work done.
Right. Well,
And I'm already doing other work with, you know, being on tour. So I did it. It was strategic. Like, I did it on purpose. You know,
right.
I have a plan. I'm quite disciplined, but yeah. So that was kind of the point, because I was like, oh, I just don't want to have to, like, you know,
You don't want to have to
no.
like in between tours, you don't have to go home and obviously like grind it out at some, bagel shop for,
Or
two
just be
months and
screwed, like just not know like what to do. And I was like, the writing thing was kind of doing okay, and I just kept getting more jobs, and it was working, and then, you know, so I was like, okay, well, and I love writing. I love it. Like, it's, being a freelance writer is ridiculous, because basically I've given myself homework for the rest of my life,
of
which is
course.
so dumb, but
You've given yourself deadlines and word counts.
yeah, but like I wouldn't trade that for, you know, going in and having to work at an office or whatever. Like, you know, I can't get hired in an office or anything like that. I'm leaving 2 months. There's like, you know, there's no one wants to deal with that. So it was perfect. The things, they aligned. Right.
Right. Right,
So,
right. Well, and that, like I like the fact that you had the wherewithal because like you said, you're disciplined and calculated because I think a lot of people, I mean, especially within this, independent music community, it's like um obviously the prime time to tours, 17 to 25. Like that's kind of the age where it's like, all right, I don't have too many responsibilities, like,
yeah.
I kind of fuck off and do what I want. But
Yeah.
I think that's the perfect time where you can start to figure out like you did, where how those two worlds aligned, where it's just like, all right,
Mhm.
what do I enjoy doing and how do I make money off of it while still simultaneously being able to do what it is, exploring what I'm doing
Yeah.
musically or whatever. Um,
Well, and just I always like, in my head, I played in a band because I liked it, and I like going on tour. And you know, your first couple tours, you don't make any money, and
no,
you
it,
know, you're like, okay. And so, and I was like, you know, I got like this. Obviously, I can never rely on this. Like, I'm never going to rely on music, like that. So I got to find something else that I enjoy just as much. That's a bit more realistic as a career.
right, right. Well, and I think it's so funny because I don't think I think that mentality, while I'd like it to be more widespread, it just doesn't seem to exist. Like, a lot of people aren't realistic about the fact that, even if they are in a successful band, it's the fact that like, there's realistically a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not going to be pleasant when it comes and hits you, and you're not prepared in any way. And it's like, I just see so
Yeah.
many people like those, just, I don't know, whether it's illusions of grandeur or they just, they don't, like you said, the discipline to understand that like, okay, I need to figure out something like, because I mean, so many bands like, especially within this whole, whatever, like Warp Tour community, where it's like they come up with a business plan first, and then they come up with a manager, they come up with a booking agent, and then they come up with the music, and then here is the way that our band will be presented. It's
Mhm.
essentially like, a boy band in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
um but then obviously it's just like, that can only last for so long, and then what are those, 22-year-old kids with neck tattoos and hand tattoos going to do? You just wonder, where it's just like, oh, I don't know, like I wish that value was promoted a little bit more, where it's just like, okay, like, you can still have all these tattoos, but you can probably do something else with your life besides just getting up there and playing guitar or whatever. At least.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm pretty hard on myself, and maybe I was like bit strict to be worrying about those kind of things.
Sure.
I'm always worried about money. It's so stupid.
Right. Well, you're. I mean, that obviously came from somewhere. I mean, you moved out when you were young, and you had to worry about it then. So, what better time than that time to worry about the rest of your life, right?
Yeah, but you know those people, like I have those friends who like, you know, they're like not working for a couple months and somehow they just make it by and it's all fine. And I'm like, how can you live like that? I would be so stressed out all the time. I would be crumbling, shell of a human, freaking out.
Right.
You know, I don't know. I'm pretty my boyfriend always makes this joke that like there's the like Mish that is on stage and is crazy and that people think, and then there's like the super strict, like straight-faced person at home. I don't know.
You're like, it has to be regimented. It has to fit in some sort of compartment in order for me to understand.
No, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't want to ever be like stuck, you know?
Yeah.
And I like being busy and I like working.
Right. You want to have, well, and I think, you know, sort of to wrap this all up in some cohesive manner.
Yeah.
I think something that is honestly very indicative of the, you know, independent music community is that, you know, people do spin like 10 plates at a time, you know, like they are trying to be active in many different ways. And whether that is, you know, whether that is discipline, whether that is, you know, ADD, whatever you'd like to call it. I think that's, you know, that's something that is unique in independent culture in general. And that could be like, you know, stand-up comedy, or it could be playing in bands.
Yeah.
But I mean, I mean, just in hearing how you're describing it, you know, it seems like it's obviously out of fear, where it's like, I don't want to be, you know, caught with my pants down, so to speak. Like,
yeah.
That's
like you know, you just want to. I don't know. It's good to feel like everything's kind of good, you know. Like I don't know how we got on this, but yeah, it's good. It's good to spin a bunch of plates. I think it's good to work. It's good to keep busy. When you're bored, otherwise, you know, who wants to be bored?
Right. Well, and plus for you, you're able to express yourself in different avenues that you might not be able, you know, lyrics that you would write for White Lung might not live in, you know, one of the pieces that you write for, you know, Vice.
Exactly. One is very like, you know, being on stage and performing, you know, and writing lyrics is a completely different bag than sitting down and writing like a piece about whatever I choose to write about. You know, it's like two different sides and I get to express them both. So it's really nice. Right.
Yeah. Well, that's good. You know what? It sounds like you have your shit together. You've got, you know, your next 10 years planned out. I don't need to check in on you for a while.
No, I'll be okay. Don't worry.
No, well, that's cool. Well, honestly, I do appreciate you obviously taking the time to do this, because
no problem.
I enjoyed myself, and I hope the general internet will enjoy it as well.
Me too. Thanks for talking to me.
Sweet. So that's what's up. That's Mish. And yeah, she's awesome. I'm looking forward to see the band when they come through. And I think if you are in any of those general areas that they're playing, you should go see them as well, because I have a feeling it will be quite a spectacular show. Visit propertyofzach.com, 100wordspodcast.com, and until next week, be safe and enjoy whatever it is you're doing. I know that's very general, but, you know, I can't get too specific. See you guys.